Did you know a man was hanged in 1950 for murders that his own neighbor later confessed to, and that this catastrophe exposed the blind spots of how we think and investigate? The man was Timothy John Evans, a tenant at 10 Rillington Place in Notting Hill. His wife, Beryl, vanished in late 1949, and their baby Geraldine was found dead. Police focused on Evans. He was tried at the Old Bailey, convicted, and hanged at Pentonville Prison on the 9th of March 1950. 3 years later, the house itself revealed a darker truth. Police arrested a different tenant, John Christie. Inside his flat, officers discovered the remains of several women, and Christie later confessed to multiple murders. He was executed in 1953. Suddenly, the neat story the investigation had settled on, Evans as perpetrator, looked painfully wrong. Insight 1. Human minds prefer a tidy narrative. Investigators had a suspect who fit an explanation, so evidence that matched that story was spotlighted and anomalies were downplayed. This is confirmation bias in action. Once a theory is chosen, our attention and memory start working to support it. In the Evans case, small inconsistencies were treated as proof instead of invitation to doubt. Imagine a police interview where an officer hears a nervous quiver and files it as guilt instead of stress. That single interpretive move ripples. Witness statements get folded to fit the narrative. Alternative suspects are never pursued. The consequence is not just a bad investigation, it can be a wrongful death. Insight 2. Social status and expectation shape credibility. Timothy Evans was working class, stumbling through a marriage with serious domestic instability. John Christie was a seemingly quiet, respectable man whose crimes hid behind a veneer of ordinary life. People assumed danger looked a certain way, and that assumption skewed judgment. We underestimate how quickly class and demeanor become proxies for innocence or guilt. When professionals unconsciously let social templates decide who seems credible, they substitute stereotype for evidence. It's a subtle cognitive shortcut, but in courts and police stations, those shortcuts have consequences measured in lives. Insight 3. Memory and confession are fragile. Under pressure, people confabulate, agree with leading questions, or accept narratives suggested by authority. There are documented moments in the Evans story where testimony and confessions were inconsistent, shaped by how questions were asked and by the weight of expectation. A coerced or mistaken confession can feel decisive, but psychology shows it can be deeply unreliable. There's a counterpoint worth stating. Sometimes evidence is damning and a guilty verdict is right. But the danger is treating conviction as proof and then stopping the search for disconfirming information. Good investigation is iterative. It tries to falsify its own hypotheses, not just accumulate confirming facts. Example 2. Decades later, inquiries like Sir Daniel Brabin's in 1965 examined the chain of evidence and the broader context. The inquiry concluded that Evans had probably been innocent. The state issued a posthumous pardon in 1966. That institutional reversal shows how slowly systems can correct themselves and how costly the delay can be. So what do we take from this, practically? First, cultivate a habit of hunting for the alternative explanation. When you find yourself certain, ask, what would prove me wrong? Second, document decision points and dissent. Institutions that require written, time-stamped reasons make it harder for single narratives to ossify. Third, normalize humility under pressure. Encourage people to voice doubts without fear of being seen as uncooperative. On a personal level, this matters because the same cognitive machinery that failed investigators can fail us in everyday life. At work, when a project looks doomed. In relationships, when one story about a partner replaces curiosity. In politics, when tribal narratives outrun facts. Practicing a small ritual, deliberately naming 2 alternative explanations before deciding, reduces tunnel vision more than you might expect. The Evans case ends painfully, but with lessons. A tragic execution became a catalyst for legal scrutiny, public debate, and eventually, change. It reminds us that smart people can make fatal decisions when they stop testing their assumptions. We cannot alter what happened at 10 Rillington Place, but we can let its lessons shape how we think. Slow down, seek disconfirming evidence, and remember that humility is a safeguard against tragedy. That's the legacy of a man whose story forced a nation to ask a hard question: how sure is sure enough?